There's something about outliving nearly everyone you work with that makes a person stop protecting a story. For 6 decades, the cast of Lost in Space kept the truth buried. The real story of what happened on that set. The secrets the network never wanted public. The sacrifices nobody was supposed to see stayed hidden behind a smiling family lost among the stars. But the surviving cast members in their final years finally started talking. And what they revealed is darker and stranger and more heartbreaking than anyone imagined. A robot suit that nearly killed the man inside it. A beloved star who faded so completely that when he died, no one found his body for a week. A villain who was supposed to be written out after 5 episodes, but who seized control of the entire show. And a rivalry with Star Trek that ended in a secret nobody was meant to know. This is the untold story of Lost in Space. The tragedy, the betrayal, and the friendship that survived it all. When Lost in Space premiered on September 15, 1965, television had never seen anything like it. The Jupiter 2, the ship that carried the Robinson family into the void, had an interior set that cost $350,000. That made it the most expensive standing television set of its entire era. The original pilot alone cost $600,000, and it was not the campy, colorful adventure you remember. It was a serious survival story about intelligence and endurance and a family fighting to stay alive. But CBS had other ideas. The network wanted a recurring villain. It wanted a robot. It wanted the show to feel safe enough for the whole family to gather around. So 80% of that expensive pilot was cut, and the pieces were stitched into the first 5 episodes of Season 1, transformed into something the creators never intended. The result ran for 83 episodes across 3 seasons. And the theme music, that soaring, hopeful score, was written by a 24-year-old named Johnny Williams. Decades before he became the most famous film composer alive, he was just a young man scoring a show about a lost family in space. What nobody watching at home could have known was the chaos behind the cameras, and the quiet tragedies already beginning to unfold. Dr. Zachary Smith was never supposed to be the star. He was designed to be eliminated within 5 episodes. Jonathan Harris, born Karasukin, a name he changed at 17, understood exactly what that meant. A 5-episode villain is a career trap. So Harris did something audacious. He began rewriting his own dialogue, his own scenes, inventing the characters voice line by line. He created the insults that would become legend. Bubble-headed booby, nickel-plated nincompoop. The cowardly preening, endlessly quotable Dr. Smith was not written by the show's writers. He was built by Jonathan Harris, 1 episode at a time. And it worked. Harris negotiated himself a special guest star credit on every single one of the 83 episodes. The character who was supposed to vanish in the first month ended up defining the entire series. Irwin Allen, the show's creator, admitted it openly. Smith was not originally created as a comedy character, but Jonathan Harris dictated what they should do with him. Harris knew the secret television before almost anyone else. The character everyone loves to hate is the one nobody can turn away from. But for every winner, there's a cost. And in this case, the cost was named Guy Williams. Before Lost in Space, Guy Williams was a genuine star. He had played Zorro for 4 years on Disney, a swashbuckling hero with a face made for posters. He was promised the lead of the Robinson family. He was supposed to be the center of the show. Instead, as Dr. Smith's role expanded, Williams' screen time quietly shrank. Episode by episode, the hero of the story was pushed to the margins. Mark Goddard, who played Don West, remembered the atmosphere exactly. The show started going more toward a robot and Smith. Jonathan Harris himself admitted it was very difficult for an actor to endure. When Lost in Space was canceled, abruptly, without ceremony, Guy Williams walked away from Hollywood. He found something he had lost in America: adoration. He became an enormous star in Argentina, where he lived for the last 21 years of his life, celebrated in a way the industry that abandoned him never managed. And then came the ending no one saw coming. On May 6, 1989, Guy Williams died from a ruptured brain aneurysm. He was 65 years old, and because he lived alone, in an age before mobile phones, his body was not discovered for about a week. The man promised the lead of a television series died alone, and stayed that way for 7 days before anyone found him. Bill Mumy, who had played his son, put it in 4 words that have never stopped haunting the show's fans. When the show ended, Guy Williams died. The robot is one of the most beloved characters in science fiction history. But the man who brought it to life paid a price almost no one knows. His name was Bob May, and the suit he wore weighed approximately 200 pounds. Inside that metal shell, the temperature was unbearable. May's own jacuzzi and sauna combined. There was barely any airflow. On at least 2 confirmed occasions, Bob May passed out from lack of oxygen inside the robot, and the production's response to a man losing consciousness inside a 200-pound costume? There was no time to stop filming. June Lockhart, who played Maureen Robinson, remembered the surreal detail that said everything about the conditions. Bob May was a devoted smoker, and she could see smoke drifting through the robot scenes between takes. And then there was a final insult, the one that still stings. In all 3 seasons, across 83 episodes, Bob May's name appeared in the credits exactly 1 time. 1 episode. That single credit meant lower pay and reduced residuals for the rest of his life. Yet May never became bitter. At conventions, he became legendary for his generosity, staying to sign autographs until the last fan was finished or the cleaning crew forced him to leave. The man inside the machine turned out to have more heart than anyone who ever signed his paychecks. Every science fiction fan knows Star Trek. Far fewer remember that Lost in Space was, by the numbers, beating it. Gene Roddenberry actually pitched Star Trek to CBS first, and CBS turned him down because they were already developing Lost in Space. So Roddenberry took his show elsewhere, and the 2 became rivals in the same time slot. The ratings told a story that surprises people to this day. Lost in Space consistently ranked between 32nd and 35th in the weekly Nielsen ratings. Star Trek never climbed higher than 52nd. The silly show about a family in space was, week after week, the more popular one. And then there was The Secret, the one that made the rivalry stranger than anyone knew. Lost in Space was so strapped for time and budget that its makeup artist borrowed Spock's ear molds from the Star Trek production to create an alien character. The 2 shows, supposedly locked in competition, were quietly sharing the same prosthetic ears. Even the men behind them could not outrun each other. Irwin Allen died on November 2nd, 1991. Gene Roddenberry had died 9 days earlier on October 24th. 2 giants of television, gone within a 2-week window, as if the rivalry followed them to the very end. The end, when it came, was as cold as the rest of production had been. Lost in Space was canceled on February 19, 1968. Not because the ratings had collapsed, but because Irwin Allen refused to accept a 15% budget cut for a 4th season. The family Robinson was stranded forever, not by a villain, but by a spreadsheet. The cast learned about it in the most impersonal ways imaginable. June Lockhart read about the cancellation of her own show in a small notice in the entertainment section of her morning newspaper. Marta Kristen got a phone call and was, by her own account, speechless. And Bill Mumy, who had been just 10 years old when filming began, went home and wept. The show that had made them a family, in the strangest way, simply stopped. No finale, no goodbye, no explanation to the people who had poured their lives into it for 3 years. But here's a part of the story the darkness cannot touch, because the relationships forged on that set turned out to be more durable than the show itself. Bill Mumy, Angela Cartwright, and Marta Kristen, Penny and Judy Robinson, never stopped finding their way back to each other. Mumy and Cartwright were even briefly engaged in the early 1970s. Decades later, Mumy would post a photo of the 3 of them together, captioned with the kind of warmth that only real family has. Judy, Penny, and was spotted on Earth yesterday. Bill Mumy, a devoted Star Trek fan his whole life, went on to appear in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, where his character dies. The boy who played Will Robinson finally got his wish, and it came with the cruelest possible twist. Mark Goddard, who had been warned by Guy Williams early on that Lost in Space was a bad show, walked away from Hollywood and earned a master's degree in education. He became a special education teacher, a quiet, meaningful second act that outlasted every robot and every villain. And June Lockhart, the matriarch, the voice of warmth and grace, lived to see it all. She appeared in the Netflix reboot, her voice carrying everything you expected from it after 60 years. Intelligence, warmth, and grace. She died peacefully in Santa Monica on October 23rd, 2025, at 100 years old. The story of Lost in Space could have ended as a footnote, a campy 60s show, remembered for a robot saying "Danger, Will Robinson," and little else. Instead, it became something stranger and more enduring. It became a show whose behind-the-scenes story is more compelling than anything that ever happened on screen. Consider the ultimate irony. The episode The Great Vegetable Rebellion, famous for featuring a villain in a foam rubber carrot costume and for turning Dr. Smith into a stalk of celery, was ranked 76th in TV Guide's 1997 list of the 100 greatest television episodes. That ranking placed it higher than Star Trek's The City on the Edge of Forever, one of the most celebrated hours in science fiction history. The silly show had, in its own strange way, won. Jonathan Harris went on to voice Manny in Pixar's A Bug's Life, a career that ended the way it began, with a character audiences could not forget. When the 1998 Lost in Space film offered him a cameo, Harris refused with the sharpness that had defined him. They offered him an innocuous 6-line bit they laughingly called a cameo. He died in November 2002. And when the Netflix reboot arrived in 2018, it paid tribute in a way only true fans would understand. The new Dr. Smith was named June Harris. June for Lockhart, Harris for Jonathan. Bill Mumy appeared as Dr. Z. Smith. Angela Cartwright played Dr. Smith's mother. The old cast returned, not to relive the past, but to pass it on. Lost in Space was never really about a lost family in space. It was about the people who made it. The ones who sacrificed their bodies, their careers, and in some cases their lives, for a show the world still remembers 60 years later. A villain who rewrote himself into a legend. A hero who faded until he died alone, undiscovered for a week. A man who nearly suffocated inside a robot and kept smiling for fans. And a family of actors who never stopped being a family, long after the cameras went dark. The next time you hear the words "Danger, Will Robinson," remember what it cost. Remember Guy Williams, alone in Argentina. Remember Bob May, breathing smoke through the seams. Remember the secret they kept for 60 years. Not because it was shameful, but because the story they wanted to protect was each other. So tell me, which of these revelations hit you the hardest? The man who died undiscovered, the robot that nearly killed him, or the rivalry that secretly shared Spock's ears? Drop Robinson in the comments and tell me which one you never knew. I read every single one. Hit the like button if you believe these people deserve better than they got. And subscribe. We tell the untold story behind the shows you thought you knew every single week. See you in the next one.